Disclaimer: this video utilizes a lot of voice actors, many of them acting as volunteers or were paid. This video may contain views considered controversial to some that the voice actors were not made aware of. I kindly ask to not assume that the voice actors share the same opinions that I do. This video also discusses topics that may be sensitive to some, such as general trauma and its effects on victims, religious trauma specifically surrounding Islam.
Hello, Forsy friends. What's up, stinkers? It's me, Mayor Stinktown, the town where we stink good. Hey, so remember that one video I made where I reviewed Nirnama, and then I tried to move on with my life? Well, actually, I kinda accidentally became obsessed with it, specifically on one singular character that barely gets any screen time and doesn't make it past the first novel. You know, as you do. Nirnama is a novel about— I made a whole ass video talking about it, go watch that. But if you really can't sit down and watch a 1-hour YouTube video, Nirnama is a novel about the titular character named Nirnama, meaning nameless, and his little fun gay journey alongside his little fun gay friends to defeat a mega wizard sultan named Jagatsuchi, so that said mega wizard sultan doesn't enslave an entire Nusantara era Malacca with his mega wizard sultan powers. It's fun and gay / pass, and for the past 3 months I accidentally hyperfixated on the gayest of all the characters, Laksamana Tuha, a character based on Hang Tuah. And nobody else is based on Hang Tuah, don't worry about it. He was introduced in the novel around the midpoint of it as one of Nirnama's fellow disciples under their master Adiwaja. And that is literally all I can say before we get into spoiler territory. All you should know is that he has, to the surprise of many who has actually read Nirnama I'm sure, become my favorite character. But why? Those who have read the novel know how short-lived his time in the spotlight was. Even the author himself acknowledges that Tuha didn't really have much time to show off when talking about Nirnama's future comics that will feature Tuha. Quoting from his tweet showing some comic pages of Nirnama meeting Tuha that I have translated.
The 4 first pages of Chapter 8 in Nirnama, the comic The Guardian of Lake Chini that is soon to be available. This is one of the retcon for the narrative of Nirnama in the comic. In the novel, Nirnama doesn't meet Tuha until after Nirnama returns from Serava. However, in Nirnama the comic The Guardian of Lake Chini, Nirnama stumbles across a battle between the soldiers of Semutar Putih and the combined forces of Bagat Durjana and Beruang Petir. He witnesses Tuha fighting with the 2 servants of Indra Kayangan Kingdom at the same time. In the novel, I never got the chance to showcase Tuha's strength. Only in Nirnama Tales of Semenanjung, the prequel, did I get to show that. So with the comic later, I wish to correct this issue. I want to show Tuha's ability to the reader much earlier.
Gee, dude, I wonder why he didn't get to make much of an appearance in the novel. So what is it about him that makes him particularly compelling to me? Are there really some hidden depths behind Tuha's character, or is he just a gimmicky twist for the novel? This video will be going into that, but before I do, let's do some housekeeping. See, while in the last video I tried to act all objective and professional, in this video I'm gonna be stupid because I want to really spend some time just talking about him. I'm going to form a timeline of his entire life and talk about my own personal reading of his character and role in the story. So this video will be very spoilery, especially in regards to anything Tuha and some bits on Jebat and Nirnama in the prequel, Nirnama Himpunan Hikayat Tanah Semenanjung, or as I would like to translate it, Nirnama, a collection of chronicles from Semenanjung, and a base novel. I'm going to pretend the comics and its retcons don't exist because I like my brain cells intact actually. As of now, I haven't completely finished reading Nirnama 2. I'm at chapter 10? But I'm pretty confident in thinking that it won't have as much of an effect on my reading of Tuha because, well, if you haven't read Nirnama and are worried about spoilers, you might as well pause and click off right now because 3, 2, 1, he's dead from the base novel, but there are some paragraphs that will probably appear from Nirnama 2 in this video, alongside some bits from the informational book about the characters. Now with all that housekeeping in check, let's try to unpack Tuha's character, hopefully without having to make pacts of any demons. See what I did there? See, I'm really trying to be more fun with my writing.
Part 1. The Tuha Timeline.
So let's start with something that I like to call the Tuha Timeline, or the TTT. Yes, I am going to milk this acronym for all it's worth. I think it'd be good to make sure we're all on the same page of what happens to Tuha in the text so we can properly analyze his character. I'll be going over Tuha's entire life from his origins in the prequel to his death in the base novel because there are parts of it that really show me how tragic he really is. So starting in the 8th chapter of the prequel, we get shown that Tuha's life was kinda not the greatest. He's an orphan child having to get by with working for an uncaring and strict boss at the docks by moving heavy sacks of herbs and other tradable goods to ships by hand. Tuha always dreams of being someone much more powerful at the palace though, after his area was visited by the Sultan at the time, Sultan Mansur, and his admirals. It's not specified how exactly, but the Sultan was giving aid towards the people in need in that area, Tuha included. It left an impression on him, especially towards the main admiral at the time, and he vowed to be able to be part of that one day. Him working at the docks was actually his way of trying to gain more money so he can pursue that in the first place. Sometimes he spent his free time looking at the edge of the Samutapute Palace to watch the richer palace folk, just watching and hoping to be able to get a glimpse of the Sultan and the main admiral again. So, a bit of a sad start, but don't worry, it will get worse. Okay, so Tuha has to send a sack thing to a merchant ship, just as usual, daily grind routine and all that. But then some thugs come over and start causing a scene. And after making a weirdly racially charged comment, they start rousing a rabble, but fortunately, and unfortunately for them, Tuha's the bigger rabble-rouser than them and starts calming them down by punching them in the face. The merchant assistant that Tuha helped asked if he wanted to meet with the actual merchant owner of the ship, and also the person the thugs wanted to fight because reasons. Tuha said he just simply wanted cash as his reward because he's a businessman like that, and also he hoped to be able to use the money to get a chance to enter the palace. He then finds out that there's a competition being held by the Sultan where contestants gotta fight the main admiral in order to find students for Adiwaja, a master of Silat that helped to first seal away the evil wizard Sultan I mentioned a while ago. Seeing this as his chance, he used the money to buy some new clothes and enter the competition. When he enters the competition, he meets Jibat, the only other young man his age there who also entered after his little sister was killed by his dead parents' loan sharks. It's kinda like going to the gym after a breakup. He wants to study under Adiwaja in order to get revenge on the people who hurt him and his family. Tuha shares his condolences and the two talk a bit more about their dreams before it's Tuha's turn to fight the main admiral, who is named Surya Kanchana. As per the conditions of the rule, Tuha actually rouses up the crowd a bit when he declares that he and Jibat will become admirals to the main admiral, which really showcases a more louder attitude in comparison to Jibat's at the time. Anyways, Tuha probably gets the shit kicked in. Like, the main admiral did not give a shit. He chokes Tuha out until he loses consciousness in the end. But the way Tuha kept getting back up before that made the main admiral feel like he was different than all the other contestants, and Tuha was chosen to be Adiwaja's student while he was unconscious. Poor guy. It's okay. Jibat got his shit kicked in too. Tuha gets taken into Adiwaja's secret mountain to train, and not much seems to happen when he's training there until we have another time skip of Nirnama as a little baby 10-year-old getting taken in after his entire village was destroyed by Jakatsuchi. Oh, fuck. Oh, my sentences are so long for no reason. But anyways, rough for Nirnama. Tuha is a very nice and supportive older brother figure to Nirnama actually, even if he's a bit more haughty and thinks Nirnama's antics are funny versus Jibat trying to be the more responsible one and teaching Nirnama to be patient when Adiwaja doesn't let him train in favor of doing chores instead. Now, interestingly, at some point, when Nirnama has to jump off a waterfall, as a whole thing, don't worry about it, Jibat mentioned that he has to let go of the need for revenge to keep his heart pure, but Tuha has kept his ambition of wanting to become a more powerful figure. Put a pin in that. That's gonna be important for my discussion of Tuha's character. At some point, the eldest son of the Sultan at the time, Alauddin, who was always training with them, by the way, this entire time, I just didn't feel like mentioning him, left Adiwaja's training and abandoned his kingdom to focus solely on religion and becoming a hermit, I guess. Since then, Adiwaja started bringing them down from the mountain to a nearby village so that they can actually know what it's like to fight off temptation in an environment that isn't just the mountains, and what it truly means to be a Muslim in a way that won't lead them becoming hermits too. They help clean up the mosque in the village and they listen to the talks held by Adiwaja for the villagers to listen. After a while of doing this, they hear that the cultists of the evil wizard Sultan, Jakatsuchi, as another reminder, are going to hold a sacrifice of a young girl. Uh-oh, that's not good. So Adiwaja and his students crash the ceremony and save the girl. I mentioned this because there's a small interaction after they stop the ceremony where Tuha gets a little bit proud of himself and Jabat scolds him for it. That would be the second time we're shown Tuha getting scolded by Jabat for being prideful. Put a pin in that. After some more time passes, Tuha and Jabat are taken into the palace to become admirals because the evil wizard sultan is being a bit too much of a problem for the kingdom at that point. When they become admirals, Tuha is overjoyed. The new admirals get access to a house and woman. Hell yeah! Jabat and Tuha are tasked to deal with some battles at some borders with some Indira Kayangan soldiers. That's the evil wizard sultan's kingdom, if you're wondering. Jabat is assigned to the north while Tuha is assigned to the south to help Kastri. In the meantime, Tuha is enjoying all the luxuries he's getting now, feeling like he's finally being rewarded for his troubles. Jabat just looks on while still trying to remind him to be humble. It does not work. It especially doesn't work when Tuha absolutely slam dunks the battle he was assigned with using his fighting and strategy skills, getting high praise from anyone in the palace including Sultan Mahmud, who has now just become the biggest fan of Tuha at this point, inviting him to eat together and such. Tuha also wins a bunch of other unnamed battles which only made him more popular. This isn't great for Jabat's relationship with Tuha though, because Tuha's starting to not do his prayers and Tuha's really not liking the way Jabat keeps reminding him about his ego and being humble. After an unspecified amount of time, Sultan Mahmud has to visit this kinda small and totally obscure place that I'm sure you history nerds don't know about, Majapahit. Mahmud's worried about being attacked because a few of Majapahit's ex-admirals became influenced in Jagat's cult, so he brought Tuha with him, alongside Surya Kanchana. Unfortunately, they do in fact get ambushed by said ex-admirals, one of them being Taming Sari. And unfortunately, that's two unfortunately's, Surya Kanchana got injured from being hit by 5 arrows, so he's not too long for the world. Tuha still fights Taming Sari and all his other goons, but right before he defeats them, he gets into contact with the demon thing that lives in Taming Sari's Kiris, who is also named Taming Sari. Don't worry, any and all mention of Taming Sari will now refer to the demon rather than the warrior. The demon promises to give him all sorts of power in exchange for a drop of Tuha's blood and the blood of his enemies. Tuha is actually conflicted about this at first, since he was always taught to not trust a demon bastard, but Taming Sari has fire powers, and that's pretty cool. So he takes the deal and defeats Taming Sari, the warrior, before being appointed as the new main admiral after Surya Kanchana passes away. So, we're now halfway through Tuha's story here, but here's where things become a bit iffy because Hilal Ashraf's writing kinda sucks. I mean, it becomes a bit more abstract and up to interpretation. There's a whole bit here that isn't properly portrayed in either the base novel or the prequel, so apologies if things gets a bit confusing. Instead of being actually shown what happened, we only hear second-hand accounts of this happening, so in this specific section I'm referencing to Nirmala's and Nirnama's conversation with each other about Tuha's behavior in page 351 of the English novel. So, after getting Taming Sari, at some point Mahmud starts getting the hots for this gal named Tun Fatima, but she didn't like Mahmud. Mahmud was surprisingly not angry about this at all, even if the rejection stung him. But Tuha apparently, and I quote from Tun Nirmala's mouth, took it upon himself to win Tun Fatima's heart. He did so successfully to the point that when her father wished to return home, Tun Fatima refused to leave Tuha's side. And then, Tuha used sihir to make Tun Fatima hate him and like Sultan Mahmud. At this point, Nirnama also thinks about how Tuha's demeanor has changed since they trained together under Adiwaja. Put a huge pin in that. I will be talking about this. After that, Tuha and Mahmud's relationship became very close, but Tuha and Jabat's relationship basically shattered here. Jabat confronted Tuha about the rumor that Tuha used sihir, and Tuha doesn't bother denying it. Jabat questions him, asks him why he did it, and Tuha emphasizes that he did it because he is admiral, that his job is to fulfill his lord's orders no matter what it is, and he simply did it to fulfill the want that Mahmud had for Tun Fatima's heart. Jabat tells him that no, they're meant to be fighters for justice, to follow the teachings of Allah. Tuha replies that he only needs to follow the Sultan's orders, that Jebat is just like the others that act all high and mighty in comparison to his lord. Jebat tells him how else can he be compared to if he has him doing black magic to fulfill meaningless desires. And Tuha snaps. Jebat and Tuha fight, and it gets dangerous for Jebat as Tuha uses the powers of Tamingsari in the fight, but it gets stopped by Tun Nirmala, thankfully. Okay, a bit of a tangent. I completely respect the work of Tuan Firdaus Abu Bakr. It's good to have multiple artists, and Nina Honey can't do everything, and he has his great moments too. But goddamn, does the illustration for this fight look off? It looks way too calm between Tuha and Jebat when at this part they're literally screaming at each other in the text. Probably wasn't given the script for it, but still, Hilal Ashraf really could have told him to amp up the energy a bit. This illustration looks more like it's a consensual spar that got a bit too heated and not a complete breakdown of a lifelong friendship that has been splintering from frustrations on both sides over the course of years. Like, goddamn, the sibling fight in Wolf Children was more violent than this, and that was an argument between 10-year-olds over whether or not school is cool. Like, come on now, man. Anyways, after that, Jebat is sent to the South Borders to stay there for 3 whole moon cycles, which is like 3 months. Jebat questions if this is punishment for attacking Mahmud's favorite boyo, Tuha, but the Sultan tells him that it's Tun Nirmala's idea. The Sultan agreed to it because he wants Jebat gone, but they do still need him around, so rip Jebat. It's okay, he goes and sets up a few things for the main novel's plot with a certain rich merchant ship guy. But Tuha's story continues without Jebat from here on out, because Mahmud's not quite done with getting more wives. He's starting to get dreams from a supposed magical mountain princess that wants to marry him, but makes demands like golden bridges and barrels of blood, so very cool. Mahmud tells Tuha to look for Mount Ludang Princess, but he returns empty-handed. How strange, surely this doesn't mean anything nefarious though. Mahmud's dreams of the Mountain Princess keeps going for 5 years, which is officially the longest I've ever heard of a dude getting edged. Now, if you have watched my review of Nirnama, you would probably remember what happens from here on. Nirnama, now a big boy himself, comes back, hears about the Mountain Princess and the Fatima stuff, and gets rightfully skeptical. He goes to Nirmala, Jebat, and Tuha to go see her and see what's up. He also confronts Tuha about the Sihir thing, which makes Tuha mega mad about it, even if he doesn't really deny it. They put it aside for a bit to talk to Mount Ludang Princess, where she calls herself a goddess, which isn't too great, even if Tuha is being a bit of a simp about it. Then, Jerka comes to attack right then and there, and Nirnama finds out that Tuha and the princess were dating due to some plot stuff and reveals it all to the palace, which prompts Tuha and the Mount Ludang Princess to attack. Nirnama tries to get Tuha back to his side, but Tuha tells him that he's doing this all to betray Mahmud and become Sultan himself, that what Jaga speaks of about Sihir is true, and that Islam is a narrow-minded way of living life. Wow. Tuha and Mountain Princess fight Nirnama and Alauddin when he joins the fight, and Alauddin fucking kills Tamingsari the demon, what? And after one more attempt to get Tuha back, he's then immediately killed by the Mountain Princess after Nirnama keeps trying to bring him back to their side, telling him that she has no use for him anymore. And Tuha's story ends there.
Part 2. What the fuck was up with that?
So, where do we even begin to unpack all of that? I guess I could begin by talking about what Tuha's character and story is trying to convey. There are 2 ways that we could try and uncover this. There's what I have gleaned and concluded based on my own reading of the text given to me, and there's the Word of God given by Hilal Ashraf in the informational book, where he talks about his thought process in writing Tuha alongside the other characters in the novel. The book has not been translated into English like the prequel, however I can try to translate it myself. I'll have the picture of Tuha's page appear on screen so that other people can verify the translation. I super pinky promise I'm not making shit up.
Why is it Tuha and not Tua? I was fascinated by a heated discussion on Facebook regarding the validity of the existence of the character Hang Tua. There I found the perspective of Prof. Ahmad Adam, an editor of Hikayat Hang Tua, that believed he didn't exist. If he did, he would have been named Tuha, Tua, or To. There I had an idea for an interesting plot twist back when I didn't even get a name for the main character. And so I named the main admiral of Samudra Putih as Tuha, the older brother disciple of Jebat. Tuha to me represent those that can't control their aspiration, always feeling like he's not enough. If given the chance to go even higher, he would have taken it, even if the road to that is dirty and corrupt. I also think that for as long as Adiwaja had mentored him, he noticed this fact, but he tried to teach Tuha how to be aspirational moderately. However, guidance isn't always granted to humans. Because of that, while Adiwaja was surprised, he wasn't melancholic with Tuha's fate in the Nirnama novel. Having dreams and aspiration is one thing that's good, but make sure the road to those dreams is a good one.
So, Tuha's character is meant to be a big villain that showcases how ambition and greed can lead someone to do bad things and cause grief for themselves and others, and I can see where that comes from, I guess. Everything Tuha did insofar was meant to further his own career and gain more power for himself. From his pact with Tamigsari to him joining the tournament to begin with was all about becoming admiral. His relationship with Jabba began to fracture when he was getting closer with Mahmud, and to give Hilal Ashraf some credit, it's a flip on the original legend that was about Hang Tuah being endlessly loyal to the Sultan and showing it to be a bad thing. Hilal Ashraf's take is a showcase of how the people reading of Hang Tuah as a legend has changed based on their changing societal views on what it means to be a good person. Back then, people who are loyal to their bosses, the Sultan, was an admirable trait. Now people would call you a bootlicker if you went half the length Hang Tuah did for your boss. But to be honest, this feels like a bit of a shallow reading of Tuha's character. Saying Tuha's character is all about ambition is like saying Naruto's a story all about ninjas. Kinda true, but that's only scratching the surface. Yes, Tuha was ambitious, but I don't feel like that's the full story here. His ambitions in the novels come from being a victim of circumstances and what ultimately influences his growth and decisions. And I feel like that leads to a much more interesting reading than what many of the books in the series would like for me to believe. The books really do try to paint Tuha as an unforgivable person because of his ambitions. There's a few paragraphs in the Nirnama 2 novel that goes like this.
In the end, when he was chosen to become the next main admiral of Semotar Putte, after the fall of Jagat Suchi, his real name was revealed to all, Tuah. Not so dissimilar from the name of his previous superior who betrayed the Semotar Putte kingdom, the previous main admiral of this kingdom, Tuha. Some believe that it is a divine act from the heavens. Tuha the betrayer was replaced with Tuah the lawyer. Tuha, who did not question Sultan Mahmud and allowed him to walk further on the corrupt path, was replaced by Tuah whose ideas, opinions, and close friendship were valued by Sultan Alauddin, who in turn worked hard for the good of his people. Tuah, who was humble, close with the common folk, easygoing, always seen with a soft and calm expression, and ever faithful to the teachings of Islam.
And listen, I really don't think Tuha really gives off the biggest villain vibe than the story wants me to think. Yeah, sure, he isn't as pious or religious as Nirnama or Jabban is, but it's really not until near the end of his story that he goes out of his way to harm somebody for the sake of his goals. That person being Mahmud, and I guess Nirnama, but that was because he was exposing him in Mount Ladang Princess. And funny how those two things only happen after he gets into contact with MLP, a sorceress who was sent to the kingdom to manipulate the Sultan and cause havoc. Tuha legitimately does good things that help the kingdom of Semotar Putte, like winning that battle Kasturi couldn't win himself and so many other battles that were shown. Any praise he got from that was from his own hard work. He has some weird thoughts about Surya Kanchana dying, thinking about how fortunate it is that the main admiral position is vacant now, which is a bit strange because Tuha did supposedly admire him when he was younger. But also, if you remember in the TTT, the same guy did choke out a young Tuha until he passed out, so not gonna lie, RIP plus L plus Bozo. Listen, I get that Hilal probably just wanted to paint Tuha as this villain whose downfall was his greed and ambition trademark, and I don't disagree that Tuha is very flawed, and all of what I said could also be the entire point of Tuha, that even if there is a reason why Tuha becomes a bad person, that it's not an excuse for doing bad things or being a bad person, that somebody's bad actions isn't always obviously bad like Jagat's and could slowly creep up the same way Tuha's did. but that doesn't make him a villain, and especially not bad enough of a villain that deserves to die in comparison to all the other villains that did. I'm being serious. In comparison to all the other villains that died, which range from catfishing to start a war and gleefully racking up a body count, the murder version, Tuha's actual tangible crime would be that he was planning to do, oh my god, something bad by planning to murder Mahmoud. I guess you would say that making a pact with a demon is also bad, but I'm gonna be for real. His deal with the Tamingsari demon is really not that bad, especially in comparison to deals like Jagat's. Tamingsari's contract proposal involved a drop of blood from Tuha, and the blood of anyone that Tuha kills afterwards will be what Tamingsari feeds on in exchange for its power. And this is the best deal in the entirety of the Nirnama series. Tuha is an admiral who would already be killing people that would be supposedly deserving of it anyways, and it's not like Tamingsari was asking for a set amount of blood each month or something. I get it, demon pacts are bad, but also Tuha isn't sacrificing babies and women like Jagat is doing on a nearly weekly basis. The novel has given me no reason to think that this is a bad thing aside from banking on the fact that I'm Muslim and no Sikh here is wrong. And yeah, it's wrong. But so is murder, and here's a drawing of Nirnama, our hero, on a literal pile of bodies. So clearly, nuance exists in the world of Nirnama, and some bad actions can be justified. What am I meant to think? And all of this to say that the word of God is wrong, and clearly the author is dead. That or the word of God is incredibly flawed. Now I'm not saying that Hilal Ashraf doesn't know what's canon on his own text, nor that he deserves to die, even though I will treat him like he is. But it's like I said, I have my own interpretations completely based on the text given that disagrees with what is probably intended. I think Tuha is a tragic character that couldn't leave behind the trauma that led him to be ambitious the same way Jibat and Nirnama was. Tuha to me isn't a villain like the books portray him to be, but an anti-hero that could have been an amazing ally for the main cast if he wasn't killed by his own teammate. And his trauma doesn't just affect his ambitions, but his relationships with other people, and of course his views on religion. Refer for a minute the beginning of the Tuha timeline. Tuha was a street kid with no parents and was described to be struggling with survival. We don't get much detail about it, but considering that he knew how to fight from a young age indicates to me, at least, that he was in situations where he had to. And then he meets Sultan Mansur and possibly Main Admiral Surya Kencana when they were giving out aid and seemingly admires them. He got a job just to be able to find the chance to be able to work at that palace one day, and spent his free time looking from the edge of the palace, looking at the richer palace folk to get a glimpse of them again. I don't doubt that it's because he loved how much more powerful, more important, and most of all, more free they were. He wanted so desperately to escape the life he had, to go from surviving to finally living, and the only way he could think to do that was by becoming admiral, so he decided to become admiral, no matter what it took. The fact that he refused to meet the merchant owner of the ship he saved in favor of money to be able to look for an opportunity is enough to show how much he has tunnel vision into that idea, even if meeting that merchant to be thanked and possibly compensated was so much more than just money. The only way in his eyes that he could gain his freedom and power was becoming admiral. And by all accounts and purposes, what's wrong with that really? Nirnama wanted revenge on Jagat Suchi for killing his entire village, and Jibat's desire to become admiral was rooted from the anger he felt about loan sharks killing his little sister. Both came from the feeling of wanting vengeance and closure for what happened to them. But that didn't apply to Tuha. He didn't have one thing happen to him the same way Nirnama and Jibat experienced. The two of them lived pretty okay and normal lives until their own major trauma event. Tuha was just the most unfortunate out of the two. He didn't have family or anyone to lean on unlike Nirnama or even Jibat, despite the fact that he and his little sister were orphans too. Jibat at least had a much nicer boss that he worked for. Tuha was alone and struggling presumably all his life, being under the mercy of other people, only being able to consistently rely on nobody but himself was just something he always knew. He wanted to leave that. Is that really so wrong? He didn't want to kill anyone for revenge like the other two. He just wanted to no longer be under anyone else anymore, to be able to do anything he wanted, whenever he wanted, to never be in pain anymore. That's not wrong. A lot of people in this world right now are in terrible situations that they wish they could escape from. Maybe it's a child of abusive parents, maybe it's someone also in poverty and is struggling to be able to have food on the table. Maybe it's even someone in an unsafe country. and they're all not wrong for wanting that. Nirnama as a novel has not given me a reason to believe otherwise. It has told me that being egotistical and arrogant is a bad thing, but it has not shown me why Tuha's specific motivations are. Even when Nirnama and Jebat left behind their own motivations of vengeance and anger, Tuha didn't. And why would he, honestly? Also, while we're on the topic of ego and arrogance, I can have reason to believe that Tuha's ego comes from his trauma as well. Delusion and narcissism is known to develop as a coping strategy in abused children, so it's really not hard to imagine that Tuha's ego was something he used as a shield to make sure he didn't go insane when he was stuck on the streets eating rats and moss or something. Tuha also seems to hate being pitied or looked down on because he made sure to buy new clothes with the money he got from the merchant assistant before he entered the tournament. The only reason he did that would either be because, again, he valued having that one bit of comfort above all else, or he valued to give off the image that he wasn't struggling. Jebat actually thought that Tuha came from money because of his new clothes, so that's also possible. Also, I want to add that because I am comparing Tuha with Nirnama and Jebat a lot, but I'm not saying that Nirnama and Jebat's traumas aren't as serious as Tuha's. Getting your family killed is a pretty big deal. Shocker. But experiencing one big event, but otherwise having an okay life, has a different connotation to how you would cope from the aftermath versus being forced from a young age to survive in a consistently harsh environment with no clear escape. It just manifests differently. So why then, even if Tuha's motivations were all about being free and independent, was he so determined to be so fiercely loyal to Sultan Mahmud, especially in the prequel? Well, there are a few reasons for this. The first one being that it's just Tuha's job. That's it really. He just knows it's his job, so he does it. There's a whole thing in the prequel about how Tuha prioritized his job over his religion, but I do want to get into how Tuha's past and actions connect to his religious views. Be patient, okay? Mwah. The other reason being that Tuha is just doing it as a means of gaining more power and influence, which is something that is implied in the base novel, that Tuha was slowly gaining more influence than Tun Nirmala because of his tightening relationship with Mahmud. It's also revealed that he was planning on killing Mahmud to be chosen as ruler instead, with Mahmud's elder brother Alauddin being absent from the kingdom. By the way, if this was the case, then the whole argument between Tuha and Jebat would be Tuha lying out of his ass because he really didn't care about loyalty at all. He only saw Mahmud as a safety net and nothing more. It adds that other layer to what Tuha says and also establishes that he's also semi-unreliable at times as a narrator. I think that the best explanation is a mix of both in a way, except for the killing Mahmud part. I'll get into how out of character that is for Tuha later. Of course, Tuha being somebody that fought so hard to become Admiral would obviously not want to fight with the one person that is above him to keep it. He felt like he trained his entire life to become Admiral and nothing else really, while Jebat sees being Admiral as his way of fighting for Allah. Tuha just desperately wants to be comfortable from all the strife he has faced. Not only that, I do think Tuha felt like that if he was closer to Mahmud, he would feel safer and more secure that way. There are few people that want to mess with an admiral, even fewer that would disturb a friend of the Sultan's. I would also like to mention that even though Tuha's motivations were all about wanting freedom for himself, he still spent most of his life being under somebody else's mercy. He only ever got aid from the Sultan, and after that he spent his life working and being under an uncaring boss. A life like that would make you feel trapped. But if being trapped is something that you always are, that cage starts feeling more like a home. It's ironic in a sense that Tuha tried so hard to escape from being taken advantage of, and the only way he felt like he could find that would be being taken advantage of by the Sultan. It only becomes more ironic in the future when he starts getting involved with Mount Ladang Princess. And yeah, it's bad that he wanted to kill Mahmud, but I will say, up until a certain point, Tuha had never went out of his way to hurt another person. Even when he got Taming Sari, anyone he has killed either attacked first or was deserving of it in some way. Yeah, he wasn't very empathetic when Surya Kanchana died, but I would like to point towards the choking until he passed out thing. But there were two events that could have been the point where that changed. Either it was meeting with Mount Ladang Princess or the Fatima incident.
Part 3. Tuha might not have the best luck with women.
I'm going to be looking at the Fatima incident first because it happened before Tuha supposedly meets MLP, and I also believe it's connected to how Tuha became susceptible to MLP's charms. I would like to establish first and foremost that I truly do not believe the explanation given by Tun Nirmala, Mahmud's advisor and friend of Sultan Mansur, about what happened. The Fatima incident wasn't shown definitively in text what exactly happened. We're only shown second-hand explanations, and this is what Nirmala claims to have happened. I'm taking this directly from the English translated version of the Nirnama base novel on page 352 and continued a bit into 354. This will be a bit long, but put it into 2x speed if you're really that impatient.
Tun Nirmala shook his head.
Nay, it is Tuha. He has become naught but a puppet of my Lord Sultan, caring not for the principles of halal and haram. The welfare of the people is no longer his concern. All that occupies his mind is the desires and pleasures of my lord.
Sensing the gravity of the situation, Nirnama ventured to ask.
To what extent?
My lord's third wife, Tun Fatima, was a comely lass hailing from the kingdom of Ganga Negara. Her father, a merchant, came to Malacca with her, and news of her beauty spread far and wide.
Tun Nirmala replied with a hint of bitterness while Nirnama listened in silence.
My lord was saddened, but not angered. Tuha took it upon himself to win Tun Fatima's heart. He did so successfully, to the point that when her father wished to return home, she refused to leave his side.
Burdened by the weight of his revelations, Tun Nirmala confessed everything he knew. Nirnama's eyes slowly furrowed in disapproval. He did not relish where his story was headed.
Tuha then used sihir to twist her emotions, turn her love for him to hatred, and drive her into the arms of my lord. My lord was overjoyed at Tuha's machinations. They had already been close, but that one deed cemented their bond as if they were kin. And so Tuha now wields an influence that nearly rivals mine within this kingdom.
Kakanda Tuha practices sihr? This is a grave accusation, Mamanda Bendahara.
Nirnama spoke with a frown. His once light tone turned sober. Nirnama had met Tuha several times after Tuha was appointed as the prime Laksamana by Sultan Mansur. The first had been after Nirnama completed 36 full moons observing the peninsular. By the time, Tuha's demeanor and style had changed compared to when they trained together under Adiwaja. Though Tuha lived a lavish life since becoming Prime Laksamana, and thus appeared to be consumed with power, Nirnama did not want to suspect evil thoughts about the person he knew. He also did not want to speak ill of Sultan Mahmud, who was already known for his mischievous ways. So any thoughts were immediately dismissed.
By Allah, I do not lie or exaggerate, Nirmana. You can ask Kalanda Jahar or Tuha himself. He does not keep it hidden. Tuha thinks very highly of himself, perhaps because he feels like an extension of my Lord Sultan.
Tun Nirmala's words made Nirnama's eyes widen in surprise.
And here's my thing. I get that there is canon, and this is most likely the canon thing that happened, and as much as I am using fanfic brain in this video, I still value in respecting the canon that is given. This very much could be Hilal Ashraf utilizing a lordom to exposition some Tuha stuff quickly. However, this feels like one of those things that the canon is not only weakly supported, but straight up debunked by its own text. First of all, the bit about Mahmud supposedly being totally chill and okay with Fatima rejecting him. What? I would like to inform everyone that Mahmud is a man that cares about nothing but himself. He spends his time sneaking from responsibilities to drink alcohol and be around women. He's constantly shown to be the worst between him and Alauddin. Hell, I don't even need to look far. The main plot has him chasing the skirt of a woman who has been leading him on for 5 years, who has given him a set of requests that I would like to remind everyone include but not limited to pots of tears and a bridge made out of gold if he wants to get married to her, requests that are deemed so impossible that the main character, Chindana, asks and acknowledges if this is her way of rejecting the Sultan, something that even the author acknowledges as a possibility in his informational book. Mahmud is a spoiled, bratty, bitch-ass motherfucker that doesn't understand that a no means no from anyone. This guy would purposefully sit at the very edge of the woman's only seating in the LRT even if the rest of the train is mostly empty. This guy would look at your wife when y'all meet up and go, "Where my hug at?" Smile. Like, and you're telling me that for this one random chick, he was completely respectful of her rejection? I don't buy that. Nah, I just don't. That with the added confusion coming from Tuha's methods. Let me make this clear. Tuha is known to have a strategic mind. That's how he won the battle that Kasturi couldn't. He's clearly smart, calculated, and efficient enough to do things. So why did he take the most convoluted route to accomplishing this task? Why did he even bother doing it in the first place? He was the first one that asked if he could really take the palace maids as his wife. You're telling me that lonely, flirty Tuha would pass on being with a lovely lady like Fatima that his boss was chill with not marrying anyways? That instead of just using Sihir to make Fatima love Mahmud, he went and made her fall in love with him and then use Sihir to make her hate him so she'll love Mahmud? Really? Why was it necessary to add a bit about making her hate him specifically? We've seen how Sihir works in the Nirnama universe. You just give the demon you're making a pact with blood and maybe a sacrifice and they'll do what you say. Did Tamingsari tell Tuha that he had until the rose wilted to make Fatima fall in love with Tuha so the magic would work? What? I truly don't think Mahmud is above throwing a temper tantrum about being rejected by Fatima and begging, ordering for Tuha to do something about it. Tuha does end up doing it, but the bit about Fatima falling in love with Tuha first really makes it seem like in the middle of doing so, Tuha and Fatima start getting close. Maybe not entirely in a romantic way, but still close. But Tuha had a job to do, and whatever method he used and for whatever reason, he had it done. Because why would he refuse the emotional and petty Sultan? I am inclined to believe this because Tuha being forced to do it from Mahmud's ordering is a much more in-character thing for the both of them, as established by the novel. I'm admittedly still leaning more sympathetically for Tuha here, and that is because I am biased, but it's also because I am allowed to when there's only second-hand retellings of the event, and there's information in the book that contradict those retellings, especially when the argument between Tuha and Jibat has Tuha mentioning that he only does what the Sultan wants. So what's the deal? This is the argument, by the way. Again, the prequel isn't translated, so this is my translation. I'm also only taking the dialogue for now because I am tired. It's on page 432.
Tuha! Jibat, what's gotten you to let out such a shrill, huh?
I heard you use Sihir to charm Tun Fatima to get her to marry my Lord Sultan. Is that true?
That is none of your business, Jibat.
I asked a question. Is that true?
Even if it was, how is that your problem, huh?
Ever since you got back from Majapahit alongside my lord, ever since you became main admiral, you have become too brazen in going against our religious principles, Tuha. Do you simply no longer have faith in Allah? Do you not believe that He surveils our actions? Have you forgotten what our master has taught us?
I am the right-hand man of my lord. I shall fulfill his desires, even if he desires for me to move a whole mountain. Is that not our true responsibility here, Jibat? Have we not been trained with many hardships at that damn mountain to become admirals of this land? Admirals to our lord.
We were trained to be fighters of justice and truth, the hope of our people from dangers of annihilation. Dangers like Jagat Suchi and his people that deceives the Ummah. How can we strive for hope and justice when we are not loyal to the teachings of Islam?
I am loyal only to the orders I have been given. I fulfilled my lord's wish when he wanted Tun Fatima. Thus, no matter what, I have to fulfill my lord's wish. I am not a rebel like you, Jibat.
You call me a rebel? Kasturi and I have been risking our lives at the borders longer than you have been wasting your time by the Lord's side. It is true I don't fulfill every one of my Lord's wishes. My true loyalty only stands with what is allowed by Allah. Whatever disobeys His will is something that we should speak against our Lord about.
Don't you act exactly like Mamanda Bendahara, endlessly thinking you're so much smarter and more noble than my lord. Do you all believe he lacks a mind or a heart?
What kind of mind or heart would lead somebody to use Sihir to fulfill pointless desires, huh?
Damn you, Jibat.
I'm sorry, I do respect canon, I swear, but what is this, man? And even if the entire Fatima incident was really exactly how Nirmala described it, we have the issue of Mount Ladang Princess. Because I would like to remind the jury of the court here that MLP is a sorceress who is sent by the evil Wizard Sultan to deliberately cause chaos. You know what would be a great way to cripple an entire kingdom? By using emotion controlling Sihir that we have established exists because of the Fatima incident on the main admiral of the kingdom. Would it be a cop-out that Tuha was actually brainwashed to act irrationally to maintain the idea that he's not that bad of a guy? Yeah, but it's a cop-out that has been established by the text to have happened prior. I don't even doubt that the Fatima incident would have caused Tuha to be more susceptible to MLP Sihir, but that's a bit more into fanfic theory. This is going to be a bit of a stretch, but the Fatima incident and or the MLP incident also makes sense to me how different Tuha kind of is between the prequel and the base novel. Tuha in the prequel is more boisterous and confident. He's also overall a lot more chill and relaxed in comparison to Jibat, consistently telling him to enjoy the pleasures they have. But in the base novel of the Fatima incident and or the MLP incident, he has this air of nervousness, I guess, when he speaks. Like, he's almost in a constant state of panic whenever Nirnama presses on about Tuha's Sihir or when MLP is questioned. It's very subtle, but I think you can feel it if you read the book. There's also the very obvious fact that Taming Sari is a combat demon whose abilities consist of things that are only helpful for fighting. I feel like Taming Sari having an ability to make people fall in love would be very random. I guess you could make the argument that there are ways to do Sihir without the help of a demon or jinn, but that has never been shown or established in Nirnama's canon, so blep. The fact that this shift is also where Tuha talks about killing Mahmud, I feel like this really shows those two incidents have a lot more going on than is explained. So, we've explored two incidents where Tuha was potentially being exploited. Cool, but you know, at least he has his found family of Adiwaja, Nirnama, and Jibat. They were good for him, right? Right?
Part 4. Scratch that. Tuha might not have the best luck with men either.
Yes, finally in a video about a character that is based on Hang Tuah, we're gonna finally be talking about the character inspired by Hang Jibat. Now, I did say I would leave discussions of Tuha's relationship with religion on to the end, but it is a bit relevant to this part about Tuha's relationship with these three people, so I'll either be touching on it briefly and it will circle back to this bit right here, or there will be some bits about Tuha's relationship that will be mentioned again in the next section. Also, this is going to be my final warning to tell everyone watching that the goal of this video isn't necessarily a defense of Tuha. I'm not saying he's an woo-woo baby that did nothing wrong. Planning to murder is still pretty bad, but I am analyzing Tuha based on what I personally got from the book when I read it. I guess you could say it's a defense in the sense that I'm fighting back against the label of Tuha as an irredeemable villain that deserved to die, but that too I will expand on in another part. My god, how long is this video going to be? Anyways, how is Jibat's relationship with Tuha? Well, before that, we have to cover the root of all of Tuha's problems, Adiwaja, mainly because he's going to be the shortest and anything else I want to talk about him will be in the religion section. According to the informational book, Adiwaja has been trying to warn Tuha about his ambitious nature ever since he was a student. Is this shown in the actual goddamn novels? No. Strike 2 for Hilal Ashraf's tendency to say something happened and then not showing it. Okay, maybe I am being a bit unfair. I guess Adiwaja teaching the boys about temptation by bringing them to a village near the mountaintops after Alauddin left to become the holiest man alive is him doing that. If that's the case, then I guess it's a good way to advise Tuha, but that's not him personally trying to advise Tuha against being ambitious, but whatever. Maybe I'm just being pedantic, what do I know? Let's just say for the sake of this analysis that this did happen. We have already established that this didn't work because in Tuha's mind, his ambitions are justified from the trauma he experienced when he was a poor orphan child that ate rats to live. You know who Adiwaja's teachings did work on though? Jibat. Jibat wanted to become admiral out of anger and spite from his younger sister being killed by loan sharks that his parents borrowed money from. By the way, his parents didn't die because of the loan sharks. Apparently they were killed from a completely unrelated accident where they got eaten by some crocodiles in a river, so just wanted to get that out there. It's kind of funny. But with Adiwaja's teachings, he was able to leave that behind, and it was good for him because now he's not angry all the time, and it keeps him and his intentions pure-hearted and stuff like that. That's the reason why Nirnama was told to leave his past behind, so I'm guessing it's the same reason for Jibat. And clearly, this would be very important for Jibat if having a pure heart is an important part of Adiwaja's teachings. Then he'd obviously want Tuha to have a pure heart too. Tuha and Jibat were pretty close. Tuha talks to and comforts Jibat during their tournament arc, and this is a headcanon theory, but Tuha is probably either one of the few or maybe even the only one to do that because Jibat has no other family or friends really before Tuha. Plus, remaining together on a mountaintop probably also helped to keep the two close together until Nirnama came around. Close enough that Jibat wanted to lightly remind Tuha about not being too egotistical or get lost in his ambitions. Again, if Adiwaja's teachings were so important to Jibat, it'd be important if Tuha remembered them too. A reasonable thing to do, right? Let's look at all the times when Jibat would remind Tuha about his ambitions. All of this is in the prequel, by the way. Page 350 when Jibat tells Nirnama that he will have to leave his motivations for vengeance behind. Tuha says that it's okay if Nirnama doesn't get it now and that he doesn't get it either. Jibat elbows him saying that it's because Tuha only thinks about himself, which is taken as a joke by everyone there. Tuha then emphasizes that there's no way that his motivations could lead him to becoming corrupt, and then Jibat properly reminds him to be mindful of that. Page 379, after Adiwaja and the boys just successfully stopped the ceremony where the village will kill and sacrifice a girl, Tuha asked Nirnama, "How was that? Not bad, eh?" And Nirnama said, "Alhamdulillah," and Jibat told Tuha to not be arrogant. Page 392, where Jibat asked Tuha what it's like achieving his dream as admiral. Tuha answering him that it feels really good, and then Jibat telling him to remember Adiwaja's teachings. Tuha telling Jibat that he can't be the only one out of the two that's happy here, and Jibat talks about how all the glamour and benefits of being admiral is all just a bonus for him. Page 408, Jibat catches Tuha while he's being complimented by a group of women and tells him to remember Adiwaja's teachings. Tuha does not like this and they have a discussion about it before Tuha walks away when Jibat asks if he wants to do prayers first, and he declines and says that he'll do it later. And then the last time he does this is in page 431, where Jibat calls out Tuha for the Fatima incident, says a whole bunch of stuff, and then they fight. Poggers. So something that I've noticed in all of these moments is that Jibat has the most shit timing one could imagine. The first time Jibat reminds Tuha to remember their teacher's teachings and all that was when they were having a heart-to-heart with Nirnama about what their teacher will be teaching him, right after Tuha was trying to make Nirnama feel better about not understanding why he has to let go of his past and his training. The second time is even worse than that, where Tuha was just joking with Nirnama in private after doing an objectively good thing, which I don't care what your intentions are. If I'm just having fun with my little sibling feeling good after an accomplishment, do you really gotta jump in like that? The third time is even worse somehow. Let me walk you through this. So, Jibat asks Tuha first how he feels about becoming admiral. Mind you, they just recently got this job, and obviously, Tuha is very happy about it. Then Jibat is like, "Cool, remember God though," and Tuha goes, "Yeah, but aren't you happy though?" Which is like a justified thought to have in that moment. Jibat, why are you trying to make somebody who is happy about getting a job feel bad? The last fourth one is also bad timing. Why would you advise your bro in front of a group of beautiful women? What the fuck, man? Listen, I get that in Islam there's a huge emphasis on advising and reminding your friends the teachings of Islam, but come on, dude, time and place. I think it's also important to show scenes of your characters sitting down with other characters to talk to them about something that concerns you. You should show it the right way. If Jibat just pulled Tuha to the side, invited him to a cup of tea to tell him, "Hey, I'm a bit worried about you," it'd be one thing, but almost every time Jibat tries to talk to Tuha, it's right after Tuha is celebrating a milestone or feeling good about himself. Yeah, dude, I wonder why his smile completely dropped the fourth time you talked to him about remembering your teacher's teachings when, whether subconsciously or not, you've been using that teaching moment to put him down. The other common thread I have noticed and realized as I analyzed Nirnama's text, there appears to be a misunderstanding between Tuha and Jibat in these moments. As mentioned, Jibat had to leave his past motivations of vengeance behind, and that was good for him because it made him less angry and spiteful. Tuha, however, did not do that because, as previously mentioned, his ambitions and motivations weren't tied to a specific event, but to his entire past and life of being an orphan street kid that had to eat rats and moss. His ambitions are not just tied to his motivations, it's tied to his entire person and self-worth, and manifests through his achievements and boastful nature. Jibat sees Tuha being happy about his ambitions as him not leaving behind his motivations the same way Jibat did. Thus, Jibat sees it as a bad thing, but as already established, Tuha never aimed to hurt anybody, and he never did until the very end of his life. He even did objectively good things like winning battles for Sumutapute, so why is Jibat getting on his ass about it? It's a complete breakdown of a friendship fueled by projection and expectations of what the other person should be, but it's also hard to say it's mutual because Tuha doesn't ever mess with or put down Jibat in any way, at least not until he's provoked constantly by Jibat anyways. And speaking of expectations, Nirnama. So Nirnama and Tuha for the most part have a pretty okay relationship. Yeah, sure they fight and try to kill each other before Tuha's death, but that was during peak aggressive Tuha, so that's understandable. But before that, Tuha and Nirnama have a good kakanda and adinda relationship. There's nothing Nirnama really did to Tuha that would make Tuha worse. Maybe except for when Nirnama would ask Tuha about his sihir, but honestly I feel like Jibat's the root cause to why Tuha has to default to defensiveness when he's approached about anything. There's nothing in the story that indicates anything bad about the relationship, so why do I still want to talk about them anyways? Wee woo, spoilers here, okay? Stop, okay? Big major spoilers about Nirnama's real name, okay? Alright, 3, 2, 1, go. So the whole thing about Nirnama is that his real name is Tuha bin Bahadur, almost the same as Tuha's name, and the twist is that he himself is the real actual Hang Tuah reference, and let me just sit down with all of you and be real. I don't think the way this twist is handled is all that great. Nirnama emphasizes again and again that he's just a normal person and that he wants people to see him as a regular dude. So how is he okay with people constantly comparing him to Tuha, his dead kakanda? Nirnama and Tuha's relationship was pretty close, at least from what I saw. Tuha was kind to Nirnama the same way Jibat was, and Nirnama was very shocked when he heard that Tuha went off the deep end. To me, this shows that Nirnama at least really cared for Tuha. So why doesn't being compared to Tuha make him sick in his stomach? If Nirnama read the paragraph I sent that was in Nirnama 2, I feel like he'd vomit. He should, honestly, based on the text given and all the lessons in Nirnama about staying humble. Because here's the thing, the relationship between Tuha and Nirnama wasn't tragic story-wise like Tuha and Jibat is, but it is tragic in the meta-writing sense. Tuha was just made to be replaced, and Nirnama was just Tuha's replacement, which feels unfair to the both of them. Neither of them had zero hard feelings of the other, until the very end of course, but they're just meant to be presented as polar opposites that cannot exist at the same time for some reason. It takes away their individuality as characters and frankly makes it so that there are constant rewrites and justifications for that comparison to exist when it didn't need to. Tuha is constantly shoved as this irredeemable villain as a means of putting Nirnama, the character that expressly does not like being put on a pedestal, made out of the corpse of a kakanda that I have no reason to think he didn't love. The other thing that is used to justify this comparison though is how Tuha just wasn't as religious as Nirnama was and how bad that is. So clearly, Tuha deserved to die. Clearly.
Part 5. Tuha, Religion and Trauma.
So the main way Hillel writes villains is by making them actively hate or oppose Islam, which is fine. I think we should villainize Islamophobes more. Not everyone who is un-Muslim is necessarily a villain. An example I can give is Nadim, who is part of the main cast and becomes a protagonist in the sequel, who wasn't very religious, but through some proper teaching from Nirnama, he's now a good Muslim boy. However, those that do see here and are blasphemers in one way or another are all noticeably killed. I guess another exception to the rule are Princesses Santubong and Sejinjang. Before Nirnama saved them, they also talk about believing in mountain spirits and the such. But at the end of the novel, they talk about converting to Islam. There are mentions that the people are allowed to perform their own religions, but I'll get into that for a minute. The people that are unreligious but then got redeemed by being more Muslim are portrayed to be people that either just do not know about being religious, in the case of Nadim, or are portrayed as victims that were tricked by the villains who are all blasphemous non-Muslims. There's not really a Muslim antagonist unless you count Aladdin, who was a bit of an obstacle for Nirnama to complete his goal, but he wasn't really an opposing force to be considered a villain in my opinion. So following this pattern, Tuha, who was portrayed as an antagonist that really did deserve to die, he must have been the same kind of blasphemous non-Muslim, yeah? So let's recap specifically Tuha's religious status throughout the timeline. Tuha before the tournament isn't necessarily described as religious, nor is it ever stated that he grew up in a Muslim village. Not like that would be a good enough indication of his religious status anyways, because I mentioned Nadim, who if you remember in my review video, grew up in a Muslim household and yet still believed in spirits and ancestors and such. So I guess we can just put a big ol' question mark at this part of the timeline. Then, when Tuha officially gets picked up by Adiwaja starts teaching him alongside Jebat and Nirnama about the religion. You know, teach them all about how to be a good, pure-hearted Muslim. Then Tuha gets sent to the palace and starts pushing it to the side for a bit, and then one thing leads to another, and now he made a pact with a demon. From the way it is presented, Tuha's story is kind of meant to look like a fall from grace of sorts. Somebody who started off learning about Islam but then fell off and turned to the evil Satanism religion. Does Satanism even count in this case? Isn't Satan a Christian thing? Anyways, this is used to justify Tuha as a big bad person that needed to die. And if this was a better timeline, maybe I would have said that this was an interesting approach for a character based on the most popular Southeast Asian hero, to portray a Hang Tuah character as a hero that got lost in the sauce and slowly became an opposing force. I would be... but then once again, the text bites itself in the ass a bit here. Because here's the thing, and I think those at home might have realized it too, but Tuha wasn't really that religious to begin with. I mean, obviously he knows the basics and knows what it means to be a Muslim, but a lot of the times Tuha expresses a sort of indifference towards many of the teachings. When talking about Aladdin's arguments with Adiwaja about finding enlightenment and all that, Tuha says he doesn't really get it, and when Nirnama talks about his worries of having to leave his past behind, Tuha tells him that it's fine if he doesn't understand because Tuha doesn't either. You know the part where Jebat jokes about how Tuha only cares about himself. And this alongside his excitement to make a pact with Tamang Sari, to me, this doesn't read as Tuha starting off as being religious and having a fall from grace, but instead reads that Tuha tried out being Muslim and just decided it wasn't for him. And the thing that cements this even further to me is when Tuha tells Nirnama why he has joined Jagat's side.
Tuha revealed.
Since we were young, Adiwaja's dogma has been instilled in us. We were never given the chance to question. But we cannot surpass our abilities as human beings and go beyond the realm of our existence. Lord Jagat the Holy speaks the truth, and I have witnessed it myself through the Mal'adon princess. This world is greater than Islam. Allah is but a figment of our imagination created only to scare us.
He stared at Nirnama sharply. Nirnama glared at Tuha, his expression sharp.
Then it's true that you have strayed far from the truth, brother.
I've never been more enlightened. It's you who are lost, blinded by religion.
Tuha retorted.
First of all, there's a mention of Mal'adon Princess, the person who is deliberately trying to cause chaos in Sumunta Putih for Jagat Suchi's benefit in a story that already establishes that emotion manipulation see here is a thing. There's also the mention of Jagat, who is a villain whose entire thing throughout the novel has just been being able to manipulate and lie to entire kingdoms that he is God or is godly in some way. So, Tuha has run-ins with two non-manipulative liars. The added fact that Tuha meeting these two after he fought with Jebat, it adds to the possibility that Tuha's feelings and thoughts surrounding everything that has happened to him so far were used against him by the two. But there's also those very specific lines. Lord Jagat the Holy speaks the truth, and I witnessed it myself. Through the Mal'adon Princess, this world is greater than Islam. Allah is but a figment of our imagination, created only to scare us. This is really getting into headcanon territory, but knowing Tuha's aversion of being under somebody else and his motivations of total freedom, he probably saw Islam as just another thing that was weighing him down. Jagat would have been able to use that against him, but not with a lie like he usually would, but with a singular nugget of truth that there is more to this world outside of Islam. Obviously, our world has more than Islam as a religion. I hopefully don't need to explain that to you. Other religions outside of Islam also does exist in Nirnama, as mentioned before with the people of Sarawak, and I could make a whole video about how weird it feels and my questions on what exactly separates blasphemy here and just a different different religion, but the fact of the matter is that other religions can exist in Nirnama. So if that's the case, if Jagat was the one that taught Tuha that the world is bigger than Islam, then Jagat wouldn't be lying whether in the real world or the world established in Nirnama. So Tuha, who has never been religious to begin with, who is starting to feel more and more disillusioned with his religion that he's been told to adhere to throughout his entire training life, starts to learn more about things that aren't just Islam from either Mountain Ledang Princess or Jagat. Could you imagine what that does to a person's sense of identity, to feel your grasp of who you are in jeopardy because you might have been following something that probably never worked for you to begin with? Because I have, and a lot of other people have felt the same way. The panic that it gives you, the betrayal, bitterness, and cynicism it leaves you with when you realize that the thing that people have been using to control what you can and cannot do might not actually be the end-all be-all that your peers and teachers have been telling you. It feels like grief when you lose that sense of self so thoroughly because of it. And it especially feels like betrayal from everyone that has made you feel lesser than just because you didn't fall in line as neatly or as quickly. I don't hate that people that hate Islam are villains. Islamophobes and people who think that Muslims deserve to be eradicated should be portrayed as the Nazis that they are. But what Tuha is not that. Tuha didn't care for Islam, didn't care for religion. He found something that was more comfortable to him because of his own circumstances. And yet the story wants to lump him and subsequently people like him on the same level as Nazis that want Muslims dead. You could say that Tuha became a villain by siding with Jagat because of his views, but then you could also say that the meta-narrative needed to force Tuha into that villain role because it wanted to portray Tuha's thoughts as unacceptable. Tuha wasn't ever religious. He didn't always hate Islam, but he was a Muslim because everyone else around him was. We can never say for certain if it's because he didn't care for it or if he just plain old didn't want to be Muslim. Maybe because he never felt like he needed to be religious in order to survive being an orphan on the street. Maybe it's because he was put off by the way Adiwaja taught him from the start. Or maybe it's because Tuha hated the idea of being under somebody's control so much that he rejected the idea of an all-knowing and the highest authoritarian nature of Allah just so he wasn't just another subject to another that was more powerful than him. Whatever the answer was, it won't matter because he's dead now.
Part 6. Was it a good idea to kill Tuha off?
No. Okay, fine, let's actually talk about it. So something I want to establish in this section is the fact that Nirnama is a novel that is meant to teach the reader about something involving Islam and how poggers it is. Every character's arc is motivated around this concept, and you'll be hard-pressed to find any character that doesn't have some sort of lesson about religion as the theme of their characters and arcs. Nadim's arc was about becoming more religious. Alauddin was about his problem of being too religious. Chindanu's storyline was about accepting that men and women are equal through religion. Nirnama, even in the prequel, Adiwaja's storyline after he got crippled was about finding acceptance of his situation through religion, and two villains, Ratna and Sang Kalimbai, who were apparently siblings by the way, which was only revealed in the prequel I think, also became villains because of their lack of faith in religion when they were 10 years old. Uh-oh, what? Yeah, the two villains that were mercilessly killed in the base novel turned out to have been orphaned children who became Sihir users because they were almost going to be killed for stealing food because they were starving orphaned children. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't really fault or get angry at children for acting out because of their horrible circumstances and then growing up to be not so well-adjusted adults. Yes, a horrible circumstance doesn't excuse killing people, obviously, but to portray these people as completely irredeemable villains that deserve to die feels wrong when you show us the suffering they went through and why they did it. I suppose you could say that bad people sometimes have sad backstories, but it doesn't make them any less bad. But the thing is that it's never really addressed in a nuance that religion, the thing this entire novel is themed around, asks for, because guess what? Religion is all about redemption and forgiving yourself even if you did the most horrible thing ever. But Islam also makes a distinction between forgiveness between you and Allah and forgiveness between you and other fellow humans. And if religion can make that distinction, why can't we also explore that in our own religious stories? I cannot speak. Woo! Can you really call Ratna and Sang Kalimbai bad people because they felt like they were pushed between making the decision between life or living with Sihir? Doesn't Islam also say to prioritize your life above all else? Are they bad people because they kept doing it after growing up? But do they even know what they do is bad if it's the only thing they knew? These orphaned, starving children hate Allah and they were arrogant to an imam that wanted to take them in. But, and allow me to use my AAVE lexicon here, be fucking for real, do you really expect scared, starving children to make the best decision? I don't read Sang Kalimbai accepting a demon pact as a point of no return for him, but as a tragic situation for everyone involved that was led by Jagat Suchi, the master manipulator. And now, Tuha. Everything I have said so far all applies to Tuha. The lesson Tuha is meant to be about is how arrogance, greed, and ambitions can be dangerous for you and the people around you, that if pushed too far can lead to your downfall. Tuha is meant to deserve his death as a consequence of his actions. But almost everything in the text feels like it's showing otherwise. Tuha wasn't always evil. He was a starving orphan who was forced to do child labor to survive. He wasn't arrogant. He was boastful and confident and had the skills to back it up, but got put down randomly and constantly by his only other friend. He joined the other side after he was in contact with a known manipulator. 2, if he was also in contact with Jagat. My friend, Sheep, asked me once something along the lines of, do you want Tuha to be revived? And my answer to that was, no, his death is what makes him cool to me. But after researching and unabashedly scrutinizing the text, I'm not sure anymore. I mean, reviving Tuha would still be a pretty bad idea to me. He's meant to be a death-like character. I think I just wish his death was more deserved and cooler. His death was meant to be a tragic one, a result of a fall from grace of the kingdom's beloved hero who got too lost in his own ambitions and greed. A lesson for all of us to be more cautious of our vices. What we got instead was the death of a victim of circumstance, a death that could have been avoidable if he was surrounded by people that cared a little bit more, whose death we're also meant to revel in and be glad that it happened so we can just be happy with his replacement. He didn't even get a cool death. He was killed by his teammate that we already knew was evil. How riveting. I guess he made a demon pact, but it's not this fall from grace that the books want to portray. He was most likely never religious at all. Unless that is a punishable offense, not being religious in the first place. Was the real lesson Tuha was meant to teach us was that non-Muslim people deserve to die? And before anyone thinks I'm reading too much into it, I would like to remind everyone that religions other than Islam do exist in Nirnama. It's mentioned at the end of the Sirawa arc that people were allowed to practice other religions despite the sisters converting to Islam. There's not really much of an atheist or agnostic character, but if there had to be one, Tuha fits that bill much better. His lack of enthusiasm for Islam is obvious, but I don't really get a sense that Tuha necessarily revered Jagat Suchi either. I could be wrong, but he just says that Jagat is right, that the world is more vast than Islam, which is just objectively true. I'm sorry. The world of Nirnama has other religions outside of Islam, and in the sequel, it's revealed that there is a non-Muslim kingdom, so yeah, Jagat was correct in this case. He just most likely used this one nugget of truth against Tuha. If J.K. Rowling right now said that 2 + 2 = 4, I say she speaks the truth too. It doesn't mean that I will follow her religion. I hate that bitch. I hope she gets to experience getting each of her nails slowly ripped out. Tuha's motivations for fighting in Jagat's side seem to be entirely for Mount Ladang Princess. His attack against Nirnama wasn't even said to be a planned attack that was ordered from MLP or Jagat. He did it because he got pissed off at Nirnama calling him out and got impulsive. I guess him making a demon pact is his religion, but that's a stretch that even I don't want to bother attempting. So if we had to assign Tuha a religion, it would fit for him to be an atheist or agnostic. And with that and everything we have covered so far about Tuha's actions and the purpose of Nirnama as a novel, Tuha's death would imply that he deserved to die because he was agnostic. Which is not a good lesson to teach for reasons that I hope I don't need to explain here. I don't want Tuha to be revived, but I do hate that he died in the first place, because in my mind, depending on the 2 possible lessons that Tuha is meant to teach, either his lesson is about the dangers of ambition and greed, which would make his death an underwhelming and undeserved one, or his lesson is about how bad it is to not be Muslim, or not to be Muslim in the very specific way you should be, which would make it a death with horrible and dangerous connotations. But that's my opinion!
Part 7. Conclusion.
You know, I could have been a normal Arknight's channel. But no, I had to fall into the rabbit hole of a novel that has now taken over my entire life! When I first finished Nirnama, I actually didn't think much about Tuha. I was interested in him, but it was that surface level interest that comes when you, I don't know, like white-haired characters and see a white-haired character. I like old scruffy men that look like they've been through 5 divorces. That's my favorite genre of character design. But there was something about him that I kept thinking about. Maybe it was because there wasn't much to him in the first place, but he got the hamster in my brain working overtime. The mentions of the Fatima incident, Tuha's demon pact, and his whole deal of being the Malaysian hero turning out to be an antagonist, all these things just ping-ponged in my brain. When I started talking about Nirnama or Tuha to other people, and by other people I just mean sheep in my review, I only started realizing all those little things about Tuha and the writing of Nirnama overall. When I read through the prequel, those feelings only got exacerbated even if the events in the prequel were meant to be definitive. It felt off. I started noticing and realizing things that I didn't think about during my review, things that I knew were there in the writing of Nirnama but never really ruminated on until now. What was the point of this video? The point of this video was to answer the question of why I like him, but it also points out the biggest problem Nirnama has, and that's his lack of nuance. Despite the fact that it's about religion, which is the most nuanced thing in this world, one of the things on this planet that is the most fascinating, emblematic way a culture works is its religion, because that's how its people interpret and interact with art, their world, their society, life, and death. And Tuha is simply, accidentally, a more nuanced character than I think Nirnama could handle. I mean this with no disrespect at all, there's many reasons this could be, but Hilal Ashraf is a very traditional Muslim man. I think the concept of a bad Muslim being a good person who also has no desire to be a better Muslim is simply not fathomable for him to write, not just because of his views, but also because his entire brand is about writing Islamic stories. And according to some people, you can't have an Islamic story about a good person being non-Muslim. Nirnama is not a story about Muslims, it's a story about Islam. And I feel like that was the difference that I wished I pointed out and criticized more during my review. Tuha is a bad person not because of the writing organically convincing you otherwise, he's a bad person because he's not a good enough Muslim. And with all that being said, that leaves the biggest question. Why do I like Tuha? By all means, does this mean Tuha is a horribly written character with an awful message behind him? Well, yes. Okay, sorry, I'll keep talking about it. There's this phenomenon that some people experience when they read stories where they find a character, whether good guy or bad guy, that they feel pity or empathy for, not just because they experience something bad in the story, but because they perceive that the character is suffering from an author's poor writing decision. These people will often have the opinion that they were robbed from being able to be more compelling than they got to be in the story because of one reason or another. Maybe it's because the character was stuck with a certain role in the story, maybe they're treated really badly by other characters in the story for no good reason established by the narrative. Or maybe because the reader can just tell when an author doesn't like a character that they themselves wrote. And the way that a lot of these people cope with this is by basically huffing copium, using headcanons or trying to come up with an in-universe explanations for the things happening into the character. Whether you think this is a good thing or not, it's a thing that happens and it's an interesting thing to witness people do. It's an almost paradoxical mix of valuing the world of God while committing death of the author in your analysis. This is the thing that leads to fans harassing creators to confirm their headcanons if left unchecked. And I might just be doing that to Tuha. Maybe everything that I've said so far is incorrect and what Nirmala said about the Fatima incident actually is reliable. Maybe Tuha really was just a villain. Perhaps this entire video was me looking for something that was never there because the author didn't intend for it to be there. Well then, so what? What's the problem with having an incorrect analysis or reading of a character or a piece of fiction? There definitely is a problem, right? It's annoying to see fans misinterpret or get details of a piece of work they supposedly love wrong, isn't it? There was a quote from a manga that I love called Blue Period. It's a manga about the main character named Yatora getting into art school, and at some point he goes on a museum outing with another character named Hashida. And Hashida tells him this. I consider art as food that's not edible. Everyone has their own personal preference. Just because something is expensive doesn't mean you'll like it. On the other hand, something you consider mediocre at first can become great once you learn how or where it was produced. It's good to follow table manners, but there's no need to be bounded by it too much, even if you aren't interested. When you hear something's getting good reviews, you still want to check it out. Critics may say it's not worth a penny, but it's made by someone you care about, then it's still a precious treasure. Art is less about being correct and more about how you really feel. And Tuha makes me feel seen. Before his spiral and joining Jagat at least. I love how abrasive he is, how confident he is. I love how determined he is to get out of his hellhole of a life and what he's willing to do to get there. I love that he isn't afraid to be seen as a villain and is just doing what he wants. I love that he isn't like all the other characters. He's messy and he doesn't care for Islam, and that's great. He makes me feel good to think about him in that way. I love when he was offered a demon pact and he was like, demon powers, hell yeah! Was he meant to be a character to be loved? No. But I think I've acknowledged that enough. I've put enough dollars in the OOC AO3 tag jar. It's fun to recontextualize Tuha and to read Nirnama through that recontextualization. The act of being critical and headcanoning stories is a fun thing to do, and Tuha lets me do that. Characters are simply tools, and Tuha is a damn fun tool to do all sorts of things with the story, really. I think the only time when an analysis is wrong or incorrect is when you're actively ignoring the text and whole character arcs to spread false information about a story. That's when you get a bad take and becomes Twitter's main character for the day. I love analyzing stories because I get to look at what's given to me, appreciate it while also giving my opinion and how I feel about it based on my biases. It's even more fun when you hear other people's opinions because it says something about them too. So in a way, you're learning about a story by hearing thoughts you probably would never think about yourself and about how a person sees the world based on their analysis. It's fun. I love Tuha because it's fun to love Tuha. He makes me feel good. And funny enough, I feel like I actually enjoy Nirnama more when I think that it can do nuance because while it mostly isn't, it still made Tuha. Tuha is such a perfect encapsulation of everything wrong and right about Nirnama. The narrative is incredibly uninterested about actually exploring him as a character, but he still has one of the coolest fight scenes and cute character interactions. He's deeply flawed, both in a character and story sense, and he makes way for all sorts of interpretations of him because of it. God, I just love Tuha. That's what I really feel. I just love Tuha. Outro track here. Bling, bling, bling. So that's my nonsense video about Tuha. Hooray! I really wholeheartedly was not expecting how long this script would get, but I had a lot of fun writing it. My next video will definitely be something Arknights related, and that's something I'm also going to have fun with. I just love Tuha a lot. By the time I'm posting this video, I've probably long graduated from uni. Yippee! But I can't guarantee that I will be consistent in making videos because of course I won't be. I'm still really hoping I can dedicate an entire year or so to making videos because this cannot go on. I'm operating on barely any fumes at this point. Who knows? I'll probably go move to some forest and become a hermit like Aladdin, but for video making. Anyways, this video is long enough and I won't waste any more of your time. Like, subscribe, do all the things YouTubers ask you to do, yada yada yada. If you like the art I made, I have commissions open and a Ko-Fi where I post exclusive art on there, and you can get a cute little chibi if you want it when you get memberships. And plus, your name gets to be read out at the end. Like this. Thank you to Lustia, Kaiser, J8, and Lijo for the recent memberships. I appreciate it. Anyways, stay safe, my foresty friends.